Welcome back to the Voice of Students powered by Easy Jobs.
Local part-time seasonal jobs. Throughout the world, a big debate is still going on about what contributes to gun violence. While some believe it to be mental health related issues, others believe it to be family conditions, drug use, or social issues. Mental health is something that is often left out of the conversation when it comes to gun control and gun violence, and mental health professional Grant Dew found that about 60% of mass shootings in the United States from 1900 through 2017 were carried out by people who had either been diagnosed with a mental disorder or demonstrated signs of serious mental illness prior to the attack. Let's take a look at this quick video.
Here now with more, David Wohl, attorney and conservative commentator, and Michael Starr Hopkins, a Democratic strategist who worked on both the Obama and Clinton campaigns. Welcome to both of you. Michael, let me start with you. What did you think about Joe Kennedy's comment that this is not a mental health issue?
I don't think that alone this is a mental health issue. I think here there were mental health components to it, but I think that, this is complicated. This is an assault weapons issue. This is a mental health issue. This is also a governmental response issue. We saw that the FBI had missteps. So I think that when we start talking about this, we should acknowledge it's a complicated scenario that we need to look at from different angles.
Yeah, I do think it's misleading, though, for him to say that, that it's not usually part of the problem. Devin Kelly, Sutherland Springs, the Texas church shooter, Dylan Roof, Charleston, South Carolina, Aaron Alexis, the Navy Yard shooter, Adam Lanza, Jason Holmes in the Aurora, Colorado movie theater, Jared Lochner. To say, David, that this is not a big part of this issue, I think undercuts, a serious part of what we're talking about here.
So after hearing this, why do you think mental health issues are often overlooked and left out of the question?
I don't believe that they were overlooked or left out as part of the process. I believe that the amount that they are talked about corresponds to the amount that they actually play in this. Looking back at the video, the individuals who were mentioned that had mental health disorders were brought up to describe part of this narrative that mental health is playing a big role. And I would like everybody to think about something in psychology. There's something called the availability heuristic and representative heuristic. And that has to do with our perceptions on how available something is to us and how representative it is to us. And so these heuristics can cause us to misinterpret certain data. And when we look at constantly on TV these mass shootings and when mental health is brought up, that frames our perspective that mental health plays a bigger role than it actually does. So that's the role of the availability and the representative heuristic from a psychological standpoint. To reiterate, as I said before, only about 1% to 4% of all homicides where the perpetrator used a gun in this country, as a report by the American Psychiatric Association of America has shown us. Only 1 to 4% of individuals that were perpetrators of gun violence actually suffered from a mental illness. The 4% that is still there, that is still a relatively small number, but it is still a significant amount where individuals with mental health disorders have played a role in perpetrating gun violence. And I would also like us to all think about the effect of the representative and availability heuristic and the real role that mental health is playing in this country. And I would also like to add that other nations have the same percentages of mental health disorders. However, they have significantly less gun violence related deaths, as I previously mentioned. And therefore, my question is, if their levels of mental health disorders are the same as in our country, why are they seeing less gun-related deaths? And that is because they are restricting access. There is no other answer when you look at the facts and statistics from a strategical standpoint.
So if an individual has been diagnosed of mental health, should they possess guns?
It's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
What kind of mental health disorder are you talking about? If you're talking about an individual who has major depressive disorder, individuals with major depressive disorder are usually not violent. And as I said before, individuals with mental health disorders are usually are more likely to be victims than the perpetrators of crimes. It depends on the mental health disorder. We actually have no current mental health disorder for any anger disorder. Usually individuals who do carry out violence using a weapon are very angry, and that is actually not in the DSM-5. There is no anger disorder. There are various disorders with symptoms of anger, and perhaps we need to relook at the way we diagnose individuals or think about having a diagnosis for anger. But aggression and anger are correlated with gun violence, and depression or anxiety, the most common mental health disorders in this country, are not.
Okay, so what do you think would be the other reasons for gun violence? What other reasons could be there?
I think mental health is something that's very, like, it's obviously its own separate issue, and it's something that's not very black and white in itself, and it's something that is very, still to this day, very, like, taboo. So I think that although, like, these two issues have tons of correlations, I think that each of these issues almost need to be worked on in itself.
So you mentioned something like anger issues, people having anger issues. Is there any other reasons that could be there because of gun violence?
Absolutely. You look at a lot of gun violence and hate crimes, people are influenced by extremist beliefs. If you look at the Pittsburgh shooting, for example, or shootings carried out at mosques, these individuals had very alt-right neo-Nazi sentiments, with a man running into a synagogue screaming all Jews must die, or whatever the narrative was, fueled by hatred and this underbelly of some individuals in America that are very anti-Semitic. And so if we want to really look at gun violence, that isn't a symptom of mental health. That is really a symptom of deep-rooted anti-Semitism and unhealthy beliefs. And a lot of these individuals are copycats of previous mass shootings.
Do you guys feel that there's enough emphasis on mental illness and mental health in our society, or do you think that it's kind of overlooked?
Well, I'm not entirely sure if it's just me being in the age where I am, like, growing up and really, like, am getting more involved in, like, my community and, like, paying attention to the news. But I definitely think that mental health in the last 5 to 10 years has become a less taboo topic and something that is more talked about just openly, whether that's through the media or just people's personal issues themselves. People are more open about it. And I definitely think that that's because mental health is becoming less taboo to talk about. But then again, mental health is something that a lot of people just don't necessarily get help with. It's something that a lot of people just live with and just never do anything about. So it's not black and white.
I believe we are trending towards in the right direction of recognizing mental health disorders. However, there is still a huge issue in this country where I don't exactly remember the exact statistic, but it is upwards of 50% of individuals that have either been diagnosed with a mental health disorder or have symptoms that could lead to a diagnosis of a mental health disorder. Upwards of 50% of these individuals aren't receiving the help that they so desperately need, and that can be beneficial. I also think we still have this mentality in this country where we just shoo things under the rug because we don't want to deal with it, because it is taboo, even though it is trending in the right direction. Several insurance plans do not cover mental health services, so there is a huge barrier to access and affordability of mental health related services.
I feel like now it's kind of getting a bit more attention, but I definitely feel like people just kind of swept it under the rug. People didn't want to take it seriously. People are just like, well, there could be a bunch of things wrong with you. Like, you know, but now I feel like it's getting a bit more attention. People should definitely look more into it.
So you think there's going to be a shift in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I think so too.
There's also a rise in mental health related disorders, especially amongst adolescent girls, because of increased use of social media. And social media really influences the way that we look about ourselves. And related to self-esteem, and adolescence is a very vulnerable time period for self-esteem development, especially for young girls who turn to supermodels on Instagram.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for the wonderful views. We will take a short break now.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned.